We always talk about climate change in the context of, larger global environment, but not necessarily in terms of how it connects to the equality and inequity, right? If you think about it, actually, today we're not just in a climate crisis, we're in a poly crisis. There's many crises going on. So there's a crisis of inequality, there's a crisis of poverty, there's an economic crisis, there's an environmental crisis. But that doesn't mean that each of these crises are separate. They're very interconnected. So on one hand, climate change very much does affect underdeveloped communities, vulnerable communities, people from lower socioeconomic strata.
Hi, Karan.
Hi, Sumit.
Yeah, very apt, crisp, and to the point presentation. So, my compliment to you. I'm not a specialist into the domain, but I do have a not-for-profit organization, and where this topic is very close to my heart. And we had made one concept note, and that's been presented in C20 forum, and that has been finally got selected and presented. That is a part of the white paper, which has been presented to G20. So let's wait what the policymakers do. Now, you have mentioned 3-4 points, which I totally agree with this. Number one, because I'm also part of the Green Climate Action Day, where we are internationally doing the green search engine project on green search engine, and how green is the web is, and how the behavior, because that's I think the arena where most of the people are not aware of. Rather, there is a misconception that digital arena is a clean area of climate. Now, the thing is, I'm coming to that particular point. Everything said and done, the collaboration, where, because I being a part of the not-for-profit organization, that concept note, there are seminars, there are your awareness campaign, all these things are done, but once it comes to the collaboration, there is some challenges where, because without the collaboration, we cannot really take this particular movement to an optimum level. Because your presentation also mentioned that, and I do agree fully on that. One single solution, one single entity cannot, neither it is not possible for only the government or for any other entity. Because if we just go to the deep, and if the root cause analysis we do, this is more of an habit formation. And why the habit formation is not happening? Because lack of awareness. So how can we collaborate more? I think that is the like-minded entities, like-minded people should come together, because everybody can understand. Even we can face the hit of the climate changes. I mean, knowingly, unknowingly, we all can. And so what kind of a behavioral change? You have mentioned a little bit. What kind of a behavioral change can we just influence the younger generation? And because they are the change maker. So the collaboration, I believe, where we are lacking, and how can we do more? Because I'm open for, on behalf of my organization, to collaborate more and more organizations who are working into the different field. So what do you think that how can we really increase our engagement level through collaboration?
Yeah, no, and a really good question. Thank you, Sumit. I think I see two parts of your question, right? One is there are challenges to collaboration, and how do we overcome them so that we can truly actually drive it? And then the second is how do we empower sort of the younger generation to also sort of be more active when it comes to climate. I think I'll take your second point first, to say the younger generation is very active in climate change, right? I think the conversation of climate around the world has come to the fore because of people like Greta and because of people in the global south who have been able to say that we really demand change. Like, this is not something that can continue. But those are all at a global level. At a local level, I often find that younger people, including myself, are struggling. And this is why I'm trying to also position this as more of an understanding what your local context is. It's very hard to walk the talk. We all, I mean, right now I'm using the internet and probably fossil fuel energy to be on this call. There's a light in front of me that's powered by a plug. I don't know where that electricity is coming from. I have paid for grid offsets, but that's about it. And so I think it's important that younger people recognize that we are all struggling, and that's where it really starts to make a difference, right? And then on the other hand, in terms of collaboration, I think that's truly where one of the big challenges that I saw when I do continue to see when I try and inspire collaborations to happen is that it's actually the older people who are unwilling to collaborate, right? Because everybody's sort of set in their ways, they're not willing to learn, they are sort of, or maybe they are, but they are not necessarily moving in the right direction because they all come with their own agendas. And so the first thing I think that can help overcome challenges to collaboration is that we all need to come with a clean slate. We all need to come to recognize that we are all solving a collective problem, not providing our own solutions to it, right? So that's one mindset shift. I think the second thing that then is important when it comes to collaboration, especially when it comes to climate action, is that you need to be able to open it up, right, around the world, because these solutions are not something you'll find just in your own area. You could, for instance, find a solution somewhere else in, let's say, West Africa, or you could find a solution in, I don't know, Australia, right? But you have to find a way to contextualize it. So to give you an example, one of the big sort of challenges right now that I'm working on professionally is to find a solution to deal with all of this agricultural waste that's burnt, right? There's not enough solutions here in India, but in places like Finland, there's all of these great technologies that exist. But then how do you bring those technologies here? How do you, and that's where collaboration comes in, to say that, look, the problem is that we're all dealing with air pollution, right, because of burnout. We're all sort of aware that these solutions exist. So we need to come together to find a way to then find the necessary actions that we need to do. So we need to first find people that have the money. We need to find people that have the technology. We need to find willing buyers of these technologies. We need to find farmers that can actually contribute their agricultural waste instead of burning it. And then you start to slowly add pieces together. So the second bit really is that there's a collaboration does not happen automatically, right? You start with one person and then you snowball it into a larger group of collaborators. So those are, I think, my big learnings and what I can share as reflections when it comes to driving collaboration. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much for the wonderful reply, Karan. I'd like to now call upon Shivani ma'am, the founder of Wishwa, to take the Q&A channel.
Namaste. Yeah, we'll go to our next question. You said that on a day-to-day basis, how can the common person get environment into their lives? One of the simplest thing is the cleaning agents we use for the floors, for the windows. Are there any brands, other the Hindustan Levers and the Procter Gamble's actually coming out with anything which is eco-friendly?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Shivani. Thank you for that. And I think it's very important to know that, yes, they are, it's not easily accessible at the moment because they're all just starting to develop these products. But there's sort of two sides to that, and I'll answer it in two ways. One is that we actually don't need Lysol in our homes. If you just go to your local garden, or if you walk around and collect a few leaves and you sort of put them into a pot of water, leave it for a few days, it will create a cleaning agent. And there's many things like orange peels, waste, like local waste from our kitchens that we can use. So there's that. So if you want to drive individual action, we can always do that. But then there's corporates that are really recognizing their role in providing alternatives to customers. So folks like Unilever, for instance, are working on products and formulations that do indeed, at least from what I know, look at more sustainable materials and sort of ingredients. But the issue is that there's not enough demand for them, because when you as a consumer go and purchase an off-the-shelf product that's probably 10 or 20 rupees like cheaper, or sometimes even 100 rupees cheaper, then companies are not incentivized to necessarily continue developing those products, right? So it's a sort of chicken and egg situation. But what's really interesting is that now companies are recognizing that the customer need not be the one to bear the burden of the cost, right? They need to be the ones to bear the burden of the cost. And so they are developing, they are doing R&D, and hopefully in the next year or two, we'll see a lot more products on the shelf that are more sustainable, that are more eco-friendly, that, for instance, don't rely on, fossil fuels as much as current materials do. So I hope that answers your question, because I can't say that the products are available at scale right now, but they are indeed being developed.
Is there any app, is there any website which is declaring what these products are or how to make them in the house?
There are, yes, indeed, there are platforms online that do exist, and I can share a few links with everybody, because also it depends on how much you want to do, right? So there's some very complicated formulas and some very complicated like recipes that you can use, and they're all easy to do, but then there's some that only use 2 or 3 ingredients, right, which you can do on a daily basis. So I can share these links afterwards.
Thank you so much. Ms. Lata will ask the next question.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And thank you, Vishwa, for organizing this such a fruitful talk. And thank you, Karan, for your insight on the topic. I would like to share here my experience that we have started our NGO 12 years back with the concern that, obviously the climate concern. And at that point of time, my knowledge about this topic was absolutely zero. But I got so badly carried away with the factor which, worries the whole world. So I started learning on certain things. And now I'm very proud to say that I am contributing little bit of, what the best capacity I can do from my side. So we are now into very much into the groundwater elevation, because the climate change is impacting the groundwater or any sort of a water very badly.
Yeah.
So we need to work on that, because our food security depends on it. The total economy depends on it. Nothing can be produced without water.
Yeah.
And my next concern is that now by producing green hydrogen, it's again going to impact the water very badly, because through water only we are going to generate the green hydrogen. So again, we are already water stressed. So आगे कैसे करेंगे? So we are concerned about the water. Water runs the economy. Water runs your life. Water is life.
Yeah.
So we need to concern for these essential things first. This is what my personal view is. Everything is very, very important. I mean, we can't leave them behind. But these are the life-affecting things. So we should all collectively work on it. And secondly, as far as plastic is concerned, as long as the crude oil is there in use, the plastic is an inevitable product. I mean, you have to produce plastic. So working on micro level, that each one of us, I mean the crores and the billions of people, they should stop using plastic bags and this and that. It doesn't work at all. And it will not going to work at all unless you stop the production. And production can't be stopped because we are using crude. And it's a very much byproduct of the crude. Yeah. So, I mean, we are helpless unless we find certain very, very big at macro level if we work. On micro level, we can't combat these challenges. This is what my experience. I'm working in this field for last 12 to 13 years, directly and indirectly for so many years.
Yeah.
No, I'm not so technical person, but I have learned about so many things.
Yeah. No, and really, I mean, I commend you for your work in the space. So thank you very much for that. I think a couple of things that I heard in your points was, one, about the need to sort of look at water more closely, which is true indeed. Some of the things that we do as part of the Global Shapers community, which is a network of about 500 hubs locally led by young people around the world in 500 cities, about 15,000 of us really. What we do is we do water audits in some cities where water stress is a big sort of concern. And so we work to engage local youth to start learning about what a water audit is. We teach them the tools, we give them the support in doing that. And then once you know what your sort of water consumption, what your level of water sort of availability is, what sort of the next pieces are, that's really when you can start to develop a plan of how to conserve water, right? And you can start to engage your local community. So I think on water, it's both a local and sort of a larger regional agenda that needs to be worked on, because once you at a local community level, you can sort of look at your ability to conserve the consumption of water. You can't do much about increasing groundwater levels, but then at a more regional level is where you can actually do a lot more work. And that's where, you know, corporates come into the picture. That's where businesses come into the picture as having sort of the ability to reduce their water consumption in production processes, to support more, let's say, drip irrigation processes in agricultural farms where they get their raw material from. You know, instead of using fresh water, using closed loops, circular, recycled water systems for coolants and for, you know, circulation. These are things that can happen, and these are ways that, you know, for instance, at a regional, more sort of corporate or less than individual level, you know, you can make stuff happen. The second point that I heard was about green hydrogen. I think it's an emerging area. I completely agree. The sort of fact is it will continue to create water stress. I think that a lot of work is going on at a global level to ensure that green hydrogen is not seen as, you know, the only solution. It is part of a package of solutions that's needed. You need, you know, solar, you need wind, you need green hydrogen, you need many other sort of forms of renewable electricity to match the demand that we all have, right? In the time that we have to be able to replace the use of fossil fuels for energy. And then the third point, I think, following that was about the production of crude. Yes, completely agree. Unless we stop extraction of oil, we will not be able to stop the production of plastics and you know, many other chemicals that affect around the world and, you know, in our local lives and daily lives. Even microplastics will become an issue, which then comes back to water. But what you could do, and this is something I learned very recently, is you can start to support the need for more biorefineries, right? You can use things like agricultural waste, you can use biomass to create fuel, to create bioplastics, to create textiles, to create furniture, all sorts of things, and paper and packaging, all from biomass. You don't need to rely on fossil fuels. It's just that here's where it gets interesting, because there's all of this large corporate lobby, but then at the same time, as individuals, we can demand in our local states, and you can really demand a lot more change in terms of what projects are being commissioned and what projects are being allowed to be implemented from an energy production perspective. Yeah, it's hard. It's not something that we can all do overnight. And I think there's a lot of work going on from around the world that's addressing the big issue of the oil and gas expansion. But it's something that I'm optimistic about.
Thank you.
Welcome to Shmuel. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay. I first very interesting presentation. I like to participate in this type of presentations, and I personally too very interested in the subject of climate changes and different aspects of this topic. And my question is, what, according to you, opportunities creating a climate crisis, climate changes for poor and low socioeconomic groups of population? How, according to you, climate changes can support resolution problems of poverty and social inequality?
Thanks for that question. I think it's a really important topic because we always talk about climate change in the context of, larger global environment, but not necessarily in terms of how it connects to the equality and inequity, right? If you think about it, actually today, we're not just in a climate crisis, we're in a poly crisis. There's many crises going on. So there's a crisis of inequality, there's a crisis of poverty, there's an economic crisis, there's an environmental crisis. But that doesn't mean that each of these crises are separate, they're very interconnected. So on one hand, climate change very much does affect underdeveloped communities, vulnerable communities, people from lower socioeconomic strata. because one, they have to sort of be out there dealing with the consequences of climate change. So they have to be living in these extremely hot environments. They have to deal with rapid weather changes. They have to deal with disasters when they do happen. Beyond that, they also don't have access to a lot of the solutions that I, also mentioned today, because, well, it is indeed difficult for them. So I think people working on climate change and locally and individually, the only thing that we should and must do is, one, recognize the implications of our actions on these people. So if you are, for instance, throwing something away, continuing on this idea of a circular economy, you have to also recognize that that's something that a local waste picker or someone that sort of is unfortunately homeless will end up going and picking up from waste bins from around. But if, for instance, you were to be able to support them by, instead of just throwing it away, but to actually finding people in your local communities that are affected by climate change, that can be affected by climate change, supporting them with the kind of resources that they need to deal with immediate climate impacts. So simple things like masks to deal with pollution, right? Simple things like providing them access and opportunity to shelter in times of extreme heat. These are all things that we can do to support people that sort of don't have the same kind of opportunities we do. And this is not a comprehensive list. I'm sure there's a lot more that we could do. Number one being getting a lot of people out of poverty. But that's sort of a larger agenda that I think we all have a big role. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much.
Next question is, you were saying when our previous speaker spoke, she was asking, this is not something that the common man can address. It is something the government should take it on. And what laws are ensuring that at the source of the causing of pollution, this is being addressed? Which are these laws in India?
It's a good question, and I'll be very honest and say that I'm not an expert at the sort of legal sort of frameworks and legislations in India, but there are indeed some sort of pieces of legislation that I do know about. So for instance, things like the plastic waste ban, right, is actually not intended to affect us as consumers. It's actually intended to, going back to Mitlata's point about, the fact that we can't do much about plastic. It's going back to the fact that we can't be creating any plastic waste. And so that means at the root cause, you have to stop producing that much plastic, disposable plastic, right? So that's one kind of legislation. But those are more things that happen locally, so not locally, but at least at the city level. Yeah, so there's legislations that are currently happening on, for instance, ensuring that there's more renewable energy installations happening around the world and in India. So there's sort of solar incentives for solar plants. There's incentives to develop biorefineries around India that are all coming from the government. And these are sort of subsidies or government grants or whatever it might be to actually start implementing at the sort of source, for instance. Then there's also more sort of punitive legislation that is coming up around emissions reduction from corporates, and things like in your supply chains you have to do human rights due diligence, or in your supply chains you have to do environmental due diligence, so that you are not creating negative consequences through your operations. These are sort of not just in India, but at a global level, because supply chains are not just in India, they are sort of all around the world. And so these are things that are happening at the international level. So in India, I think it's more incentives for green solutions. And then in the global context, it's about how do we ensure accountability and transparency. Those are the main legislations that I know of. I'm sure there are more that are coming up around ESG in the next couple of weeks or months. And of course, the biggest one is when the Indian government, the first government in the world to mandate corporate giving through CSR, was the Indian government. And so there's sort of other legislations like that that will continue to be improved and rolled out. So